Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
How many commitments did we have? How many reports do we have? And yet here we are yet again today.
Colby and his family were failed.
The province apologizes for systemic failures that led to the death of a young Indigenous boy in foster care, while BC's child watchdog calls for a sweeping change to the system. Plus,
it's heartbreaking, and so we try to do the best that we can do.
Homeless in the heat. A Kamloops shelter asks for donations.
Please meet with us.
While Coquitlam Council asks the province for more help at the only homeless shelter in the Tri-Cities. And
it's a beautiful bottle of BC Rosé.
wine war? Corked. BC and Alberta reach a deal to let our wineries sell directly to Albertans.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. BC's child watchdog is calling for a sweeping overhaul of the province's child welfare system. It comes 3 years after the death of an 11-year-old child who endured years of abuse, along with his younger sister, while they were in foster care. As Katie DeRosa reports, BC's Ministry of Children and Family Development acknowledges the system failed the child and his family.
I want to apologize because it is clear Colby and his family were failed.
BC's Minister of Children and Family Development has apologized for the systemic failures that led to the death of an 11-year-old Indigenous boy while in foster care in 2021.
What happened to him is unimaginable. There are not words for what he endured.
The boy and his younger sister had been violently abused and starved, all of it caught on cameras inside the home. A judge called it a house of horrors. The apology comes in the wake of a scathing report released by BC's Representative for Children and Youth, Jennifer Charlesworth. She's calling for a system-wide overhaul.
If we want better outcomes for children and youth in BC, we can't get there by tinkering in an old system that was based on colonial mental models from the 1950s and 60s. And that has ingrained certain ways of being that are deeply insidious. We have to create anew.
The child's name has not been released, but he's known in the report as Colby, which is a pseudonym. The First Nation where he died is also not being named, only that it's in the Fraser Valley. The president of the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society urged the government to act on this report and not let it sit on the shelf.
How many commitments did we have? How many reports do we have where every minister and every level of government said we commit to do better? And yet here we are yet again today.
Charlesworth called for the province to implement a child and youth well-being action plan. That could include funding for First Nations to take full jurisdiction over their own child welfare cases. Colby's First Nation is in the process of taking over responsibility for child welfare cases. The report found that this transition added an element of confusion and made it unclear who was overseeing the foster parents and who was responsible for vetting the couple, who had a history of violence. The foster parents pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and manslaughter, and last year were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Grace Lore promised the government will begin working on the report's recommendations right away. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
Like much of the province, Kamloops is under a heat warning. And one shelter there says it's getting almost double the number of people needing its help than it has space for.
It's heartbreaking, and so we try to do the best that we can do. We welcome in everybody over, the amount of 25 beds in for dinner and clothes and a shower, etc. Unfortunately, if we can't find somebody a bed in town at another shelter, we do have to say goodbye at 10 o'clock that night. But it is really hard to exit somebody knowing that they've been slogging it through this heat all day long and not being able to provide more than what we can.
The Kamloops Out of the Cold Shelter Society opens its doors from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. The first 25 people in line do get a bed for the night. The shelter says it's now asking for donations of reusable water bottles, hats, summer clothing, and sunscreen to give people needing help in the heat some more protection. Meanwhile, city councillors in Coquitlam are urging the province to provide more support amid concerns about a homeless shelter there.
I implore the province, the ministers responsible, please meet with us. Please, let's find a solution forward.
City Council unanimously voted to write letters to the BC government over concerns about a supportive housing facility in nearby homeless encampment on Gordon Avenue. Council made the decision after a new staff report mentioned safety issues like open drug use. It is the only homeless shelter in the Tri-Cities. The staff report says last year, fire crews responded to 218 incidents, mainly medical emergencies at the shelter, while Mounties handled over 600 calls in the area. Federal and provincial Conservative politicians are calling supervised consumption sites and overdose prevention sites into question. They're designed to prevent people from dying by allowing those who use drugs to do so with healthcare staff nearby. As Dan Burritt tells us, some are concerned about the tenor of the conversation around those sites.
They're drug dens. They're drug dens. And they've made everything worse.
The federal opposition leader was full-throated in his denunciation of supervised consumption sites.
What will you do around safe injection sites across the country?
I will be closing them. We will close safe injection sites next to schools, playgrounds, anywhere else that they endanger the public.
The provincial Conservatives also raising concerns later that day, suggesting the sites have a place, but they're not doing enough for long-term recovery.
We want every single one of these sites to be transformed so that they can also be places where people can be guided to proper health care and with intake into things like detox treatment and recovery. So, we actually agree with Pierre Poilievre. I listened to that interview. I think that it's important that we recognize that there have been, terrible things that have been associated with some sites.
Opposition to these sites has sometimes been intense. In Vancouver, one site's operation led to a lawsuit over alleged mismanagement causing distress in the community. In Richmond, protests boiled over at packed council meetings when municipal leaders voted to call for a site, which health officials claimed was never on the table. Sturco says she's hearing of other sites causing problems, including from a Powell River dentist neighboring one site.
People defecating on his property, injecting drugs, ripping up the floorboards of the office's deck because they believe that there was drugs dropped down there.
For his part, the federal immigration minister pushed back on Poilievre's stance.
See, this is a guy who does not care about the parents in question, does not care whether the people that are using these drugs live or die.
He says his party will keep sites open as a general principle, while admitting some, including one in his own Montreal riding, need improvement. BC's Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, Jennifer Whiteside, was not made available for an interview. She said in a statement both harm reduction and treatment options are needed, adding, quote, supervised consumption and overdose prevention sites have and continue to save lives every day, and they also offer low-barrier connections to treatment and other services people need. A political scientist says these sites are shaping up to be a wedge issue in provincial and federal elections expected within the next 18 months.
There's a way of sort of heating up the rhetoric, though, I think that's been going on that is definitely kind of intentional, I think, as a way of sort of framing us against them in terms of political choices.
Helen Jennings with Mom Stop the Harm has a different perspective on the sites. She lost her two sons, Ryan and Tyler, to drug overdoses. Tyler was using toxic drugs alone.
I think it's a really sad statement of how our politicians feel about this part of our community, that their lives are not worth saving.
Sturco says her party wants to keep the sites away from parks, playgrounds, and schools, and says there needs to be a focus on treatment. Jennings agrees some sites could be moved from inappropriate places, but argues a robust treatment system is a long way away.
So that's what we're trying to do, is keep people alive until we have options of recovery out there for them.
Dan Burritt, CBC News, Vancouver.
The BC Alberta war over wine has had a cork put in it. For now, Premiers David Eby and Premier Daniel Smith have announced a deal that will allow BC wineries to sell directly to Alberta consumers again. As Mira Baines explains, the change comes after Alberta's liquor wholesaler banned direct sales over concerns about tax revenue.
It's a beautiful bottle of BC Rosé from a small winery in the Okanagan, a family-owned winery.
A far rosier picture signaling the end of a dispute over BC wine sales directly to drinkers in Alberta.
Albertans who are visiting BC wineries can sign up for wine clubs
direct-to-consumer shipments to Alberta can start again.
In January, Alberta's Liquor Control Agency banned BC wineries from selling directly to consumers, arguing tax wasn't being paid.
This was just a way in which the markup was not being collected. And we think you need to have fair treatment. If you're going to be selling into our market, you have to be treated the same way as every other person who is buying it through a liquor store.
Smith says Alberta will eventually create a virtual warehouse to collect the markup fee, but for now, it will be on paper. Good news for 327 licensed grape wineries in BC. Some throughout the Okanagan and southern interior have been hit by wildfires, record-breaking heat, and brutal cold snaps that have devastated some crops.
The little guys need these direct-to-consumer sales to keep us in business.
This Penticton winemaker is thankful for a solution, but argues the interprovincial sales system is antiquated.
We should be in the point, click, and buy environment where Canadians can buy our wine and we remit the taxes to the appropriate provinces. Hopefully they get that.
Skinner says his industry has been used as leverage in interprovincial fights before, but for now, it's a sigh of relief.
2023 was a fantastic vintage for the Okanagan. There's lots and lots of wine there that's available. Looking forward to 2024, obviously there are going to be very few grapes and very few wines available.
Still, it's estimated that direct-to-customer sales make up less than 3% of BC wine sales. Most of them are high-end bottles that aren't even available through government channels. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Many parents in Whistler are worried now that a popular school and daycare has been told it needs to move by next summer. The school leases a site for the resort municipality, which has now decided to end that agreement. As John Hernandez reports, parents argue the move will deepen that community's mounting childcare crisis.
My fear is that my son will lose access to his early childhood education.
Katie Thompson worries she'll soon lose childcare for her 3-year-old son. He's enrolled at the Whistler Waldorf School, a nonprofit independent school that provides early childcare at about $75 a day, and K-12 schooling at about $10,000 a year.
The Waldorf School is a huge contributor to the wellness of families in this community.
200 kids take classes here, and it includes about 50 childcare spaces. But for years, the school has operated in a municipal facility at Spruce Grove Park. Last month, Whistler Council voted to end its lease agreement by June 2025, citing needs for more community space.
This is a park under a Crown lease grant, and so the grant allows us to use it for parks and recreation, and so and this field house is for community use. It's a public facility.
The municipality said it's given the school's leaders years to find an alternative space, but the school's board members say securing the land has been a big challenge.
Demand has grown in this town for all sorts of facilities, and we are amongst that, trying to find our way through that. Our expertise is running a school and daycare, not development, so we need their help to make something happen.
Parents dreading what could happen if their kids lose their schooling or daycare programs.
I think it will be detrimental to his development. We won't have any other option other than to probably find a nanny as we did before.
Childcare is needed here in Whistler, and the decision to remove 50 spots, it's just going to heavily impact us.
That's why they're calling on the municipality for more time to find a new home.
I would love us to work together to create a 5-year strategic plan.
The municipality says it plans to stick to its timeline as these parents hold out hope their kids will get to stay here for at least a few more years. John Hernandez, CBC News, Whistler.
Excavators on Vancouver Island are busy this week digging up highway sediment that is choking a creek. It's a small but vital salmon-bearing tributary of the Colquitts River. Excavators are working to take out fine sediment at Gabo Creek and replace it with salmon-friendly gravel.
Our first step is to take out the fish. So we're in there with nets and buckets, gathering all the fish and other animals that are living in there, taking them off-site, out of the work site, and then we'll get started with bringing in an excavator in and start the heavy machinery.
The goal is to recreate the healthy ecosystem destroyed by urbanization likely more than a century ago.
The end goal of this project is to improve the habitat, specifically for creating overwintering, rearing habitat for salmon. Gabo Creek is a nice small creek that provides really slow flow for salmon, particularly salmon fry, to hide in during the heavy winter flows.
And over the next 3 weeks, that crew will remove decades worth of highway sediment to create deep pools. They will also add new river rock, woody debris, and native plants along that creek. A group of people are suing the city of Vancouver over its decision to cut down 160,000 dying trees in Stanley Park. That civil suit claims chopping down the looper moth-infested trees amounts to negligence by the city. But a forest disease expert says proving that the city is negligent might be tough.
I know that they mean well, but I think they're going to have a hard case to make in terms of the negligence. I think, if anything, the city is going over and above to make sure that there's no risks in the future caused by this unfortunate looper outbreak.
The suit claims cutting the trees will ramp up forest fire risks and increase noise in the green space. Hamlin, though, says getting rid of the trees will actually help mitigate fire risks. And while the noise is an issue, it will only be in the short term before the empty gaps in the forest fill up. Evacuation orders and alerts have now been issued by the Cooks Ferry Indian Band as 2 wildfires burn near Spence's Bridge. People living in the 6 Nicholton Reserve were told to leave their homes this morning. The Tate Creek and Shetland Creek wildfires are putting those homes at risk. Alerts have been issued for Cooks Ferry Reserves 5, 5A, as well as 19. It comes as heat warnings persist throughout much of the southern interior. Some areas are expected to hit 40 degrees in the next day or two, and the same weather system could also bring lightning. Time to bring in Darius Madavi. First look at the weather and the familiar map.
Very familiar, Dan. This hasn't changed much in the last week or so. A bit of a reprieve came to the northwest. That's fading once again. Not much precipitation on the way up there, although temperatures are a bit more moderate down parts of the coast, at least down to here, than across the rest of the province, where we do have some heat warnings. Now, even inland areas of the north and central coast are under those heat warnings, much more temperate by the water, but here, easily 30 degrees. Same story for much of the interior and up the sea to sky from Squamish up to Pemberton, also into the 30s, and going to remain that way. Actually, virtually all of these heat warnings expected to remain at least through the end of this week and likely into next week. So we've got a lot of heat on the way. This heat wave does not seem to be breaking down anytime soon. And we are also seeing the risk of some storms popping up. You can actually see just now a little bit of lightning activity, but very, very small amounts, not really too active of a storm cell right there, but just a very minor one. We are seeing some lightning there. Now, across the province, not really expecting much in the way of precipitation. Still a little bit filtering into parts of the northwest. Maybe one impulse of it as we get into this weekend, but unlikely it's going to make it to much of the province. You can see here we're switching to a more coarse grain model because that one doesn't reach us far out. So don't expect to see that much precipitation. It'll be much more, much smaller amounts of it, but just more isolated. In terms of smoke, still up in the northeast primarily, but more areas are starting to see at least light amounts of it as it spreads. So be aware of that, Dan. We're really getting into the season now.
No kidding. Okay, Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do you have less change in your pocket? Are the bills that line your wallet, if there are any, getting a little stale? We hit the streets to find out why people are using less cash and the impact that is having. Stay with us. If you use less cash and coins to pay for things, join the club. A new report from Vancity finds that, from the Vancity Bank, says there has been a 31% drop in the use of cash use over the last 6 years. But have people in and around Vancouver gone cashless? Shivani Joshi went to find out.
They say cash is king, but has convenience taken the crown? Let's find out.
Yeah, I never take out cash.
Oh, why is that?
Just because I guess the Visa, like I use my Apple Pay, so it's just a quick tap and it's right there.
I think people haven't fully transitioned out of using cash all the time. It's still pretty good. I've been busking here since I was 10, so like almost 8 years now, and it's, I'd say, pretty much the same for me. Yeah.
Card on vacation. It's just easier to have than cash.
Cash or card? Oh, I prefer card. Card, yeah.
I just prefer card, and I don't like change, so I just carry cards, and it's even in my wallet or in my phone.
Card.
Yeah, why?
It's easier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you used cash?
Today, because I'm on a trip.
Well, it's because of the way the taxes and this stuff in this country are going and stuff. I don't have any cash, so I have to use a card.
What do you typically use cash for if you do take it out?
Maybe like a Facebook Marketplace purchase or something like that. Cash!
So there might be implications in a change in how we're spending our money. Joining us to talk about more of this is Christine Mayston. She is Vancity's VP of Member Experience. Thanks for being here, Christine.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here.
We've heard some people down in Granville Island, whether they're using card or cash, interesting mix. What are the reasons that Vancity saw or found behind this shift?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few contributing factors, right? So as you stated, we looked at the last 6 years and a 31% drop in cash transactions or cash being taken out at ATM. We also saw that there was a threefold increase in the number of person-to-person interact digital payments. So there's a lot of interesting trends there. What's leading to that is increase in digital technologies, allowing payments, and really people getting more comfortable with the use of cash.
Mm-hmm. Is there a demographic split, cultural split that you find, if younger versus older, when it comes to people who are more comfortable or just using cash or going cashless more?
Well, it really varies, right? You know, there's a lot of demographic pieces that fit into that. Often people that are in older demographics have a lower level of comfort with some of the technology and some of the digital transactions. But if you look at some of the information coming out of Payments Canada, actually a third of Canadians still like and prefer to use cash for day-to-day transactions.
Mm-hmm. And could there be implications if we're shifting to a cashless society? And what did Vancity find about that?
Yeah, there are a lot of implications for that. At Vancity, what's most important to us is making sure that people have choice. So whether it's in branches, at ATM, or through a digital means, that they have the choice to make the payment that is right for them. Mm-hmm. And you know, really, there's a lot of people that could be left behind in a cashless society. We want to make sure things are accessible to them. So for example, Pigeon Park Savings in the downtown east side, there are many people there that rely on cash for their day-to-day transactions and budgeting.
Now, we know that this isn't a uniquely Canadian phenomenon. This is happening around the world. Some countries, Norway, Spain, Ireland, have actually introduced laws to protect the use of cash. Do you think that's something that Ottawa ought to look at?
Such an interesting point. That's true, right? Cash is legal tender, and you've probably seen it yourself, and consumers have seen it, that there's a lot of businesses that are saying no cash. Well, actually, a recent study out of McGill University stated that this is something that Canadian legislation should be looking to. We're seeing that happen in the countries that you mentioned and in parts of the United States as well. It's important that everybody has access, and as digital transactions, digital banking proliferates, that no one is left behind.
And lastly, appreciate your time. What about the impact of the pandemic when we saw people and businesses say we don't want to have to use that exchange of hands simply because there were medical concerns?
100%, and it's really important to have choice, but there's also a really good reason to give people the choice for cash. For example, if there's a power outage, you might want to have some cash on hand. And we know that there's lots of occasions where people like to use cash. In fact, our report found that July and August, right now, is the peak time for people taking cash out of ATMs. Why? They're enjoying the summer, getting an ice cream with their family, tipping a busker in Robson Square.
All right. Christine Mayston, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dan.
A display of unity at the Republican National Convention. Some who used to firmly oppose Donald Trump are now taking to the stage to sing his praises. We'll take you to Milwaukee next. Day 2 of the U.S. Republican National Convention is focusing on crime and immigration. It's also a show of unity within the GOP, with nominee Donald Trump's former challengers taking the stage. Chris Reyes has more from Milwaukee.
We cast our delegate votes for the next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and his vice president, J.D. Vance.
With Donald Trump now officially nominated, with his VP pick, J.D. Vance, now on the ticket, and after a night in which both men were given a rousing welcome, the Republican National Convention enters day 2 in full campaign mode. In true Trump fashion, Tuesday's theme summed up in a slogan: Make America Safe Again, focusing on President Joe Biden's border policy, a highlight on illegal immigration, also the rise in violent crimes experienced by cities post-pandemic. The slate of speakers include big Republican names, Ted Cruz and Ron DeSantis, plus Trump daughter-in-law, Lara. In a show of party unity, those who challenged Trump for the nomination are also taking the stage, including the last person standing in that bitter race, Nikki Haley.
President Trump has unified this party behind him. There are no Nikki Haley voters. There are no this type of voter or that voter. There is only one party unified behind President Donald J. Trump.
Outside the convention arena, Trump supporters say the party's agenda resonates.
Restoring the respect to law and order, restoring respect to police officers, securing our border. That's how we get America back to our roots. That's how we get people respecting the rule of law.
I've been a supporter of his since 2016, really. And I think he's probably we finally got somebody that's listening to us and wanting to hear how to help.
This convention is building up to 2 big speeches, first from newly minted VP pick J.D. Vance, and then from Trump himself, who will officially accept his party's nomination from that podium on that stage. Chris Reyes, CBC News, Milwaukee.
The Hamas-run health ministry says an Israeli airstrike on a UN-run school in a Gaza refugee camp has killed 23 people and wounded as many as 100. Palestinian officials say the UN relief agency school was being used to house displaced families, and some of the victims are children. Israel's military says it attacked a group of terrorists operating from inside the school. Israel argues it did take steps to mitigate the risk to civilians. Israeli forces battled Hamas-led fighters in several parts of Gaza today. A freak bus crash in Spain has injured dozens of people, 3 of them in critical condition. The bus got stuck in an almost vertical position at the exit of a tunnel near Barcelona. An official says it was carrying workers to a textile plant for the company that owns the Zara fashion brand. The cause is still not clear. The family of an Edmonton man shot and killed on the street by police say they are grieving and confused. Julia Wong was with them today as they returned to the scene to demand answers.
An Edmonton family is grappling for answers after 28-year-old Mattheos Arcangelo was shot and killed by police. At a press conference today, his mother, Anna, says that she never expected anything like this to happen. And she also says that she's fearful of police after what happened to her son. It was one evening in late June when Arcangelo's vehicle rolled over on a highway. Police say the driver left the scene and a search began. Security video shows Arcangelo walking around a neighborhood. A police vehicle approaches him, and it appears he has something in his hands. Now, there's no audio in this video. Arcangelo moves forward, and the officer shoots him. Their exchange was roughly 1 minute. Minutes later, first aid on Arcangelo begins. He later died in hospital. The family today wore white T-shirts saying that's what Arcangelo was wearing when he died, and they say they want to see justice. They poured water on the street of where he was shot.
Yeah, pouring water, like in my culture, somebody just kill or murder, thirsty, and the spirit of him is still here. Then I have to give him the water. I have to wash that blood. When I pour the water on that blood, I feel like, yes.
First of all, nobody deserves to get gunned down. Whatever we do, it's not going to bring my brother back. But if we can use this to kind of avoid this from happening to anybody else, because this is really, really, really painful.
In a statement, the Edmonton Police Service acknowledges the tragedy of the incident and the impact on the victim's family and the broader community. The police service said they could not answer specific questions, citing the ongoing investigation by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Newcomers to any big city can face some big challenges. In Toronto, one of Canada's extremely tight housing markets, finding a place to live is an immense problem. And as Lisa Shing reports, renters can find themselves fronting thousands of dollars to convince landlords they are reliable tenants.
Her small one-bedroom apartment in downtown Toronto costs Lorena Portugal roughly $2,300 a month in rent. But when she was first trying to find a place, she paid a lot more up front, 4 months worth.
Obviously, it shakes your stability.
Portugal and her boyfriend moved to Toronto from Peru 10 months ago and expected this to happen. Friends had told them stories of landlords suggesting payment of 6, even 12 months all at once.
You don't have an option, because if you mention, hey, I can't afford to pay you 4 months in advance, okay, just then look to another landlord or to another building.
Rafaela Cruz heard it from several real estate agents.
In our case, he was telling us, you don't have credit score, you don't have a job in Canada.
CBC News spoke with multiple newcomers to Canada who said it was the only way to secure a home in an increasingly competitive and expensive housing market. In Ontario, it's illegal to ask for more than first and last month's rent, but there's a gray area.
There's nothing stopping a tenant from offering to pay 5 months, 6 months, 7 months up front.
Some lawyers say many landlords are trying to protect themselves against the risk of tenants failing to pay, but that means the most vulnerable won't have a place to live.
If you think about refugee claimants, they take the hardest of the cake because they're the ones that are coming from displacement. They're the ones that might come with very precarious mental health and financial conditions.
Renters in Ontario can complain to the province's landlord and tenant board, but there's a months-long backlog to get a hearing, let alone a decision. So many are opting to do what they can to get a roof over their heads now. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
There is new research about the drugs that are given to patients when they leave hospital emergency rooms. Specifically, the safety concerns that come when the number of pills prescribed is more than they need. Megan Fitzpatrick looks at the potential consequences.
A life-changing motorcycle accident years ago cost Graham Lord the use of his arm.
I ripped my C5, 6, 7, partial 8 out of my spinal cord. I have severe chronic nerve pain.
When he was given an opioid prescription for his pain, the size of it surprised him.
Off I went to the pharmacist. Handed it to him, they handed me a month's worth. And then
Lord feels lucky he didn't get addicted.
Had I got the pleasurable side, I don't know what would have happened. Like, it's scary almost.
Finding the right balance in opioid prescriptions is the focus of a new study in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. How many to prescribe and for how long.
You have to give the right amount at the beginning to make sure you can have good pain management and no unused or very little unused.
Unused pills can be misused or abused. The study involved more than 2,000 patients who went to emergency rooms for fractures, back and stomach pain, and other non-chronic conditions. After being discharged, patients kept track of the pills they consumed. On day 1, 67% took an opioid. By day 14, just 12% did. In all, thousands of pills went unused. Patients with abdominal pain took fewer opioids than those with back pain or fractures. To reduce the number of unused pills, the study suggests pharmacists start by dispensing only half of a prescription. A patient could go back for the rest if needed. And if it's not filled in a certain time frame, it could expire.
This study really stirs an important discussion in Canada to consider that opioids, yes, they're effective, yes, we need them, but how do we make sure we distribute them in the safest manner possible?
The study authors say the research should help guide ER doctors as they make critical judgment calls, especially as Canada grapples with opioid addiction and overdose crises. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Toronto.
Torrential Toronto. A downpour in the big city floods highways, underpasses, stores, and leaves many people without power. More on the deluge after this.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
A torrential downpour in Toronto caused dangerous flooding on roads and highways today. It also snarled subway and train traffic. Flooding forced the closure of parts of a major highway connecting downtown. Other parts of the Greater Toronto area have also been hit. The heavy rain also shut down Union Station, the city's main subway and commuter train hub. Environment Canada says some places could be swamped by up to 125 millimeters of rain before the day is done. The deluge also knocked out power to almost 170,000 customers in the day. Toronto has become one of several cities around the world experiencing severe weather this summer. Susan Ormiston reports on the connection between torrential downpours and climate change.
We shouldn't be surprised. Climate scientists have been warning of more intense weather more frequently, that turning up the heat in the atmosphere can spell disaster.
If you imagine a bubble of air, it can only hold so much water, and the amount of water it can hold is dependent upon its temperature. As the temperature goes up, the amount of water that that air bubble can hold goes up. And as it carries more water, it also preferentially has to rain that water out.
Toronto isn't unique, it's the latest. Severe storms swept through the Chicago area Monday, canceling flights at O'Hare, damaging homes.
The wind was so bad, it got scary.
Iowa got lashed by sudden storms tearing off roofs. This Toronto scene is becoming a familiar landscape.
The climate change is real. We're seeing the impact of it. These kind of severe storm is going to increase. So it's very important that we look at mitigating these kind of effect.
That will take time, cost billions, and force hard choices.
And we're removing things such as natural infrastructure, wetlands, grasslands, and forested areas. And these natural spaces, they actually act like sponges. So we're getting rid of so much of this and replacing it with cement.
Last year's severe fires and natural disasters in Canada cost over $3 billion in insured damages. Around the world, the impact is much greater. Southwest China saw record rains this week in a summer of extreme weather. Muddied homes in eastern Afghanistan left in the path of deadly rainstorms. And a search for survivors in Nepal after monsoon rains triggered a landslide, sweeping 2 buses into a raging river.
Our planet is trying to tell us something, but we don't seem to be listening.
Even as we pass 1 full year of record warming. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a full BC forecast, but we're going to get to, first of all, what happened in and around Toronto today. It's one thing to enjoy an Eastern Canadian storm, but that was a bit nuts.
Yeah, definitely. This is the last 12 hours or so. You can see those storms passing over the region, and also some continuing down here just south of Toronto, including by Hamilton. My hometown. Just a quick shout out. Across the region, though, a lot of thunder and lightning activity coming along with that really heavy rain. Right here, we're just looking at 4 hours, from around 8:30 a.m. to around 12:30 p.m. And you can see local time, and you can see how heavy that rainfall was and how much lightning was coming along with it. Several waves of that storm coming through, and in total, more rainfall than they usually get in the entire month of July, falling in just 3 hours. So we're talking really heavy storm. And here we can take a look at exactly how much came for some areas of the GTA. You can see that building, again, just 4 hours of data. And if we put out on the totals, you can see 135 millimeters of rain for some areas of the GTA. That is absurd. Infrastructure is not built to handle that, for sure, over in Ontario or really anywhere. That is incredible amounts of water. Major highways like the Don Valley Parkway or the 410, cars were just completely submerged. So we're talking a really serious storm. And those floodwaters, as we know here, can be full of pesticides and sewage and all kinds of nasty chemicals that you really don't want to put your foot in addition to whatever you can't see that is under those waters. So very serious situation. The last time this happened, back in around 2013, we were looking at around $1 billion worth of damage. And so that was very similar to what this looks like. So I would expect to see a lot more news about this in the days ahead. Now, it turned here to BC. Again, still heat warnings across the board. Definitely some very serious temperatures coming up. Tomorrow, still very hot in the southern interior. Probably hitting 40 again this weekend after a brief reprieve Thursday and Friday. Smoke conditions still remain extremely smoky up in the northeast. Less so down here, but still severe, or still very dense in some places throughout the day tomorrow. In terms of our highs, again, as I mentioned, a little bit of a reprieve here on the coast Wednesday and or Thursday and Friday, sorry, but then coming back up for the weekend. In the interior, not really any relief right through. We're talking high 30s into the 40s straight through the end of this weekend. That's why we're not going to see those heat warnings drop anytime soon. Now, if we look at our conditions across the province, we have lots of sunshine still, but we're starting to see the possibility of some of those storms pop up in a few places. It's a very low likelihood, but it is there, and we could see some new fire starts as a result. But Dan, here in Vancouver, we're just looking at lots of sunshine in the days ahead. Probably some pretty clouds tomorrow afternoon, though, up in the up high cloud. But yeah, sunny skies. It's going to be hot. It's going to be a nice weekend.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Battling with kings, queens, and rooks, thousands of avid chess players are in Quebec for the national championships. The enduring popularity of the board game, next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver Inbox. Applications are now open for CBC's Indigenous Pathways to Journalism program. This paid 9-month learning and development opportunity supports Indigenous candidates to really hone their skills as storytellers. Indigenous Pathways provides journalism training, career development support, and work experience. Applicants do not require journalism education or experience to apply. Learn more at cbc.ca/pathways.
The country's biggest chess tournament has kicked off today in Quebec. More than 1,000 players are competing in the Canadian Youth and Open Chess Championship.
Kwabena Ojuro reports on the growing popularity of a very cerebral game.
In the chess room, it's silent as players focus on beating their opponents.
It's always like a fight for me. Like I am very competitive as a person. Whenever I do something, play something, I always want to win.
Toms Kantans is no stranger to winning. He's been a chess grandmaster in Latvia for 10 years. This is his 3rd time in Canada for a tournament.
Last year, there was happening a very strong open tournament as well, transnational open, and I did end up winning it. So yeah, I am coming back with fresh, good memories.
This year marks the biggest turnout in tournament history. Quebec's Chess Federation says chess is on the rise in the province and is now attracting attention from the world. Some players say the pandemic increased online play, and the Netflix series Queen's Gambit revived interest.
For me, it was just a passion as soon as I started. When I was 6 years old, I learned how to play at school, and ever since then, it's just been, my life almost. And I just love the game.
Jean-Rodrigue Lemire made it into the history book as the youngest grandmaster in Quebec history.
It was something I never even dreamed of. It's just an honor because I know there's many other strong grandmasters in Quebec. Some of them have gone on to become extremely strong players. So being among that group is really special.
He's far from being the youngest in the world. 12-year-old Abhimanyu Mishra is the youngest grandmaster in chess history. This 11-year-old from Toronto is hoping to one day join the list of grandmasters.
It's a game about strategy. It's a game about how to use your pieces in different ways and creativity. There's this rush of emotions that I sort of feel when I play each move and when I'm calculating different lines.
The Open Tournament had people of many ages. Some as young as 9 are playing against people over the age of 60.
For me, it's fun, plus it's maintaining my cognitive ability as well from the health-wise. I really think that it's helping my health.
Hitagama is hoping one day to checkmate a grandmaster as he continues his late chess career. Kwabena Ojuro, CBC News, Laval, Quebec.
You play chess?
Not a big fan. It takes so long. I'd rather play 5 other board games than the time it takes.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. Now, the streak of hot, sunny weather in Metro Vancouver has some people happily hitting the beach, but you might hear some say it's too hot.
Now, when the rain comes, some people complain it's too cold and dreary. So we hit the streets and ask people what's their ideal temperature.
All right, Missy, what are we doing?
We are setting out to find out what is the perfect temperature. How many Vancouverites are going to complain about the heat before they complain about the cold? What is the ideal temperature outside? Let's go see if we can find some people to talk to. So what do you think is the ideal temperature?
Ideal temperature, I think, would be 25.
Yeah? So right now it's what, 27 degrees? Is that too much for you?
A little bit, yes. Yes, a little bit cooler. Yeah.
Would you prefer it being too hot or being too cold?
I like it perfect.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Can we ask you how you're feeling about the temperature today?
It's definitely hot.
Do you like it hot or do you prefer it cold?
I do like it hot.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it too hot for you?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What do you think is the ideal temperature?
21, 22, somewhere there, yeah.
Okay. The weather today, amazing.
What's your ideal temperature? Like when you're hanging out and you're outside and you want to have a good time, what do you think is the ideal temperature?
For me, 28, 29 is good.
Hi there, over CBC News. Can we ask you how you're feeling about the weather?
It's hot. It's very hot.
Do you like it when it's hot or do you prefer it when it's cold?
I like it when it's colder, but at the same time, it gets me out of the house, so it's good.
What do you think is like the ideal temperature in Vancouver?
Ideal temperature, maybe like 20 degrees, 25. Some people like it hotter, but I mean, you can go to the beach, you can go get an ice cream in that weather. Any hotter than 25, and it's hot.
I like it pretty hot.
Yeah.
I mean, I once did work in like 40 degrees, and that was a bit hot.
Oh.
But anything under 33 is great.
That's amazing.
It's really hot, yeah.
Do you like it when it's hot, or do you prefer it when it's colder?
A bit colder than now, yeah.
What do you think is an ideal temperature?
Around 25, I think. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how, like, what's the temperature today either, so.
I think it's like 27, 28, so you're
Yeah.
saying that's a little too much?
A little bit, just a little bit, yeah. But it's still like a nice day, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Dan, what's yours?
3 beers in the shade.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
That's
not bad.
good.
Yeah, it's a nice sort of balance. How about you?
Anywhere from like 23 to 28. It's a
Why
it's
so
a lot of
specific?
wiggle room. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Michelle Gassoub will be here at 11 o'clock for you for the late news right after the National. Good night.